June 8, 793. The tide is low on the northeast coast of England, and a narrow strip of wet sand connects a small island to the mainland. The air smells of salt and seaweed. On this island, perched above a rocky shore, sits one of the most sacred places in all of Christendom, the monastery of Lindisfarne. The monks rise before dawn, as they do every day. They file into the stone church for the first prayers of the morning. Some of them are old men who have spent their entire lives on this island. Others are young, boys given to the monastery by noble families, raised on scripture and silence. Their world is small: the church, the scriptorium, the vegetable garden, the sea. They have no idea what is coming. Lindisfarne was not an ordinary monastery. It was founded in 635 AD by Aidan, an Irish monk sent from the great monastery of Iona at the request of King Oswald of Northumbria. Oswald had spent years in exile among the Irish and Scottish Gaels, and when he reclaimed his throne, he wanted missionaries who could convert his people. Aidan chose Lindisfarne, a tidal island, remote, exposed to the elements, because it reminded him of Iona, a place where the boundary between land and sea felt thin, where solitude was built into the geography. Within a generation, Lindisfarne became the spiritual heart of Northumbria. Its most famous resident was Cuthbert, monk, hermit, bishop, and eventually saint. Cuthbert lived in the mid-7th century, and the stories about him filled an entire hagiography written by the Venerable Bede. He reportedly healed the sick, calmed storms, and once spent an entire night standing in the freezing North Sea up to his neck, praying, while sea otters came and warmed his feet afterward. Whether or not you believe the miracles, the political reality was concrete. Cuthbert's cult was enormous. After his death in 687, his body was placed in a decorated wooden coffin in the church at Lindisfarne, and pilgrims came from across Britain to pray at his tomb. When the coffin was opened 11 years later, in 698, the monks reported that his body was incorrupt, perfectly preserved, as if he had only just died. This was taken as proof of his sanctity. The cult of Cuthbert exploded. Kings made donations, nobles endowed land, wealth poured in, and with the wealth came art. Sometime around 715 to 720, a monk named Eadfrith, who would later become Bishop of Lindisfarne, created the Lindisfarne Gospels. It is one of the supreme masterpieces of early medieval European art. Each page is an astonishing fusion of Celtic, Anglo-Saxon, and Mediterranean design. Spirals, interlace patterns, stylized animals, carpet pages of pure ornament so complex they seem almost hallucinatory. Scholars estimate it took Eadfrith at least 5 years of full-time work, possibly 10. He made his own pigments, grinding minerals, mixing plant dyes, even using lapis lazuli imported from Afghanistan. A single monk on a windswept island in the North Sea, working with materials sourced from the other side of the known world. By the late 8th century, Lindisfarne was more than a monastery. It was a treasury. Gold chalices, silver crosses, jeweled reliquaries holding the bones of saints. Gifts accumulated over 150 years from kings, earls, and wealthy believers. Fine textiles, ivory carvings, liturgical vessels encrusted with garnets. All of it housed on a flat, open island with no walls, no garrison, no weapons, and no watchtower. The monks had no reason to expect violence. They were, after all, under the protection of God. No Christian would attack a holy site. And pagans, well, pagans were a memory. The last pagan Anglo-Saxons had converted generations ago. That assumption was about to be destroyed. That morning, with the prayers barely finished and the sun climbing over a calm North Sea, something appeared on the eastern horizon. Square sails. Moving fast, the ships came from the east. Their hulls were long and shallow, clinker-built from overlapping oak planks, each one riveted with iron nails. The keel was cut from a single tree trunk, giving the vessel both flexibility and strength. These were langskip, longships, and they were the most advanced naval technology in the world at that time. They could sail in open ocean, navigate shallow rivers, and land directly on a beach. No harbor needed, no dock required. A crew of 30 to 40 men could drag one ashore in minutes. We don't know exactly how many ships arrived that morning. The sources don't give a precise count. Most historians estimate 3, maybe 4, somewhere between 50 and 100 men. They were not soldiers of any standing army. They were Norsemen, free farmers, younger sons with no inheritance, restless men from the fjords of western Norway, possibly some from Denmark. The Old Norse word for such an expedition was Viking, a word that originally meant something like a journey overseas, specifically a raiding journey. The men who went on such journeys were Vikingar. What pushed them across the North Sea? No single cause. Overcrowded fjords, a warming climate that opened northern sea routes, new sail technology that turned coastal boats into ocean-crossing weapons, and, perhaps most importantly, the knowledge, likely from traders, that the coasts of Britain and Francia were lined with wealthy monasteries and no one guarding them. They were not the first Scandinavians to reach English shores. 4 years earlier, in 789, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records a small group of Northmen landing at Portland, on the coast of Dorset. The local reeve, a royal official named Biduhard, rode down to the harbor to meet them. He assumed they were merchants. He wanted to direct them to the royal estate to pay trading duties. They killed him. It was a brief, ugly incident, recorded in a single terse entry, and it passed without wider alarm. Lindisfarne was different. This was not a misunderstanding at a trading post. This was a calculated strike on one of the holiest sites in Britain. The Norsemen came ashore fast. They beached their ships directly on the sand, leaped into the shallows, and spread across the island. There was no one to stop them. The monks had no weapons, no training, no experience of violence. Some may have tried to bar the doors of the church. It made no difference. What followed was systematic. The raiders broke into the church. They tore the silver fittings from the altar. They ripped open reliquaries and took the gold. Liturgical vessels, crosses, candlesticks, anything of value was seized. They overturned tombstones. They smashed what they couldn't carry. The violence against the monks themselves was deliberate and varied. Some were killed outright, cut down in the church, in the scriptorium, in the fields. Others were dragged to the shore and drowned in the sea. The 12th century chronicler Simeon of Durham, drawing on earlier Northumbrian sources, describes monks being stripped naked and whipped, mocked and humiliated before being killed. Some were taken alive. These were the unlucky ones, in a sense. They would be transported back to Scandinavia or sold in slave markets as far away as the Islamic world. The Norse slave trade was vast, and monasteries were a reliable source of captives. Literate, healthy men who could be sold at a premium. Not everyone died. A number of monks survived, fled to the mainland at low tide, hid in remote corners of the island, or were simply left behind when the raiders had loaded their ships. It is from these survivors that the story reached the outside world. And when it did, the reaction was not grief. It was existential horror. The man who expressed that horror most powerfully was Alcuin of York, a Northumbrian scholar who had risen to become Charlemagne's chief intellectual advisor at the Frankish court in Aachen. When news of Lindisfarne reached him, he responded with a flood of letters. At least 6 survive, addressed to different recipients: King Ethelred of Northumbria, Bishop Higbald of Lindisfarne, the monks of Wearmouth Jarrow, and others. Together, they form the most detailed contemporary response to the raid that we possess. His letter to Higbald contains the most famous line in Viking Age historiography: "Never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race, nor was it thought possible that such an inroad from the sea could be made. The church of St. Cuthbert," he wrote, "was spattered with the blood of the priests of God, stripped of all its ornaments. The place that had been the most venerable in all Britain was given over to plunder by a people who did not even know the name of God." But Alcuin did not only mourn, he judged. And his judgment was not directed at the raiders. In his letter to King Ethelred, Alcuin laid out a theological argument. He cited the prophet Jeremiah. Disaster comes from the north when a people turns away from God. He accused the Northumbrians of fornication, adultery, greed, and, notably, of imitating pagan hairstyles and fashions. Consider the dress, the way of wearing the hair, the luxurious habits of the princes and people, he wrote. Look at your trimming of beard and hair, in which you have wished to resemble the pagans. For Alcuin, the raid was not a failure of coastal defense. It was not a military problem. It was a moral one. God had withdrawn his protection from Northumbria because the English had become too much like the pagans they once conquered. The Vikings were not invaders. They were instruments of divine wrath. This interpretation shaped how all of Christian Europe processed what had happened. Lindisfarne was not framed as a strategic vulnerability to be fixed. It was framed as a spiritual crisis, and that made it far more destabilizing than any ordinary raid, because the implied solution was not better fortifications, it was repentance. Word spread across the continent. In monasteries from Northumbria to Francia to Italy, monks began to include a new line in their prayers: A furore Normanorum libera nos, Domine. From the fury of the Northmen, deliver us, O Lord. Whether this exact phrase was composed immediately after Lindisfarne or crystallized over the following decades is debated among scholars. Some argue it only appeared in the mid-9th century, when Viking raids had become a constant feature of European life. But the sentiment, raw, helpless fear, was real from the very beginning. A new kind of enemy had appeared, one who did not respect the sanctity of churches, who could not be excommunicated, who struck from the sea without warning and vanished before any army could muster a response. And the most unsettling realization of all, Lindisfarne was not a one-time event. It was a beginning. The very next year, 794, raiders struck the monastery at Jarrow, on the south bank of the River Tyne, the same monastery where the Venerable Bede had spent his life writing the ecclesiastical history of the English people, the single most important historical work produced in early medieval Britain. This time, the English managed to fight back. The Anglo-Saxon chronicle records that the weather turned against the Norsemen. Some of their ships were wrecked, and a number of raiders were captured and killed. Their leader died as well, though whether in combat or from exposure is unclear. It was a small victory, but it changed nothing about the larger pattern. In 795, the targets moved further. Iona, the island monastery off the west coast of Scotland, founded by Saint Columba in 563, the mother house of Celtic Christianity and the place from which Aidan had originally been sent to establish Lindisfarne, was raided. It would be hit again in 802, and again in 806, when 68 monks were massacred in a single attack at a place still known as Martyrs Bay. After that, the surviving monks began construction of a new monastery at Kells, in inland Ireland, where they moved their most precious manuscripts, including the Book of Kells, which may have been started on Iona itself before the raids made the island untenable. Then Ireland fell into the pattern. In 795, Norse ships appeared off Lambay Island, near what is now Dublin. Raids on Irish monasteries became annual events. By the 830s, the Norse were overwintering in Ireland, building long forts, fortified ship camps along rivers and coastlines. Dublin itself began as a Viking long fort around 841. Within decades, it became one of the largest slave trading centers in Western Europe. Then Francia. In 799, raiders struck the island monastery of Noirmoutier off the coast of Aquitaine. By the 820s, Viking fleets were probing the rivers of the Frankish Empire. In 845, a fleet reportedly numbering 120 ships sailed up the Seine under a chieftain the Frankish sources call Ragnar, possibly the Ragnar Lothbrok of later Norse saga tradition, though this identification is fiercely disputed. He reached Paris on March 28th, Easter Sunday, and sacked the city. The Frankish king Charles the Bald paid him 7,000 pounds of silver, the first of many payments the Franks would call Danegeld, to make him leave. Then, deeper still, by the mid-9th century, Norse raiders had pushed into the Mediterranean. In 844, a fleet appeared at the mouth of the Guadalquivir River in southern Spain and attacked Seville, then under Moorish control. The Umayyad emir Abd al-Rahman II fought them off after 2 weeks of brutal street fighting, reportedly hanging Viking corpses from the palm trees of the city and sending 200 severed Norse heads to his allies in North Africa as proof of victory. The Vikings withdrew, but they came back, raiding the Mediterranean coasts of Francia, Italy, and possibly reaching as far east as Alexandria. A separate branch of Norse expansion moved east. Swedish traders and warriors, the Varangians, pushed down the rivers of what is now Russia and Ukraine, establishing trade routes from the Baltic to the Black Sea and the Caspian. They reached Constantinople, where they so impressed the Byzantine emperors that they were recruited as the Varangian Guard, an elite bodyguard unit that would serve the imperial court for over 2 centuries. All of it: Dublin, Paris, Seville, Constantinople, the Varangian Guard, the Danelaw in England, the Norman conquest of Sicily. All of it traces back in historical memory to one morning on a small tidal island off the coast of Northumbria. And what about Lindisfarne itself? The monastery did not simply vanish after 793. Monks returned. They rebuilt, at least partially. The community survived, diminished but functioning, for another 80 years. But the threat never went away, and it grew worse with every decade. In 865, the Great Heathen Army landed in East Anglia, a massive Scandinavian invasion force. Not a raiding party, but a coalition of warriors intent on conquest and settlement. Within 5 years, they had toppled 3 of the 4 major Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Northumbria fell in 867 when the Vikings captured York. East Anglia fell the same year. Mercia submitted by 874. Only Wessex under Alfred survived, and barely. Around 875, with Northumbria firmly under Viking control, the monks of Lindisfarne made an extraordinary decision. They opened the tomb of St. Cuthbert. They gathered his relics, his bones, still reportedly incorrupt after nearly 200 years, his pectoral cross of gold and garnet, his small personal copy of the Gospel of John, one of the oldest surviving European books, and they left. They carried the saint's body with them in its coffin, wandering across northern England for years, through Durham, through Crake, through Chesterless Street, where they settled for over a century. The community of Cuthbert became nomadic, a monastery without a fixed home, defined not by a place, but by the presence of the saint they carried, until 995. According to tradition, the cart carrying Cuthbert's coffin became stuck at a hill near the River Wear and would not move. The monks fasted and prayed for 3 days, and then a young monk had a vision directing them to a place called Dunholm, a rocky peninsula surrounded by a loop of the river. They brought the coffin there, and it moved freely again. They took it as a sign. They built a small church, then a larger one. Then, after the Norman conquest, the Normans, themselves descendants of Vikings who had settled in northern France under their leader Rollo in 911, tore down the Saxon church and built Durham Cathedral. Construction began in 1093. It took 40 years. The result was one of the finest examples of Romanesque architecture in Europe. Massive columns, ribbed vaults, a sense of permanence carved in stone. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And beneath its floor, in a plain stone tomb, lie the bones of Cuthbert, still there. The bones of a 7th century saint, carried by terrified monks fleeing Viking raids, became the foundation of one of the greatest cathedrals ever built. There is something almost unbearable about that chain of cause and effect. Lindisfarne today is a quiet place. You can walk to it at low tide across the same sand flats the monks once crossed, though the crossing times are posted on signs now, with warnings about the incoming tide. There are ruins of a later medieval priory, built in the 12th century by Benedictine monks from Durham, Norman architecture on a Saxon holy site, a few houses, a small castle built in the 16th century, long after the Viking Age ended, a visitor center, Seabirds. Nothing about the landscape suggests catastrophe. The sky is wide, the sea is flat, the wind is constant. It feels like the kind of place where nothing has ever happened. But on one morning in 793, everything happened here. A small group of men from across the sea landed on this shore and tore apart a world that thought it was safe. And from that single act of violence, a wave rolled out across Europe that did not stop for 300 years. If you want more stories like this, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.